Today we're going to be learning Rosh Hashanah Daf Yud Aleph. This month of learning is sponsored in memory of Dr. Chaya R. Gorsitman, Chaya Bat Asriel Yomi, during the period of Zichrona Livracha, during the period of Shloshim by her husband, children, and grandchildren. We especially wanted to sponsor Talmud learning in honor of Chaya because Chaya learned Gemara. Chaya learned Gemara with her father Asriel, starting in the 6th grade. This was an unusual opportunity for women at that time. And Asriel loved Gemara and made it come alive for Chaya. This experience impacted her life's work, including educating novice teachers to give children the tools to nurture their wonder and natural curiosity in order to make them lifelong learners. As part of her educational philosophy and life, Chaya championed greater involvement and engagement of women in Orthodox Jewish life, so it feels especially meaningful to sponsor Learning Through Hadran, an organization dedicated to inspiring and enable Jewish women across the world to learn Talmud. Okay, we're going to start our daf now from the end of daf Yud Amud Bet. We saw a whole list of machloket between Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer about different dates, started with this idea of the creation of the world, whether we say B'Nisan Nivra Olam or B'Tishrei Nivra HaOlam. By the way, we had this line, Michlal Ditravayu Svira Lehu B'Nisan Nivra Olam, right? We had Rabbi Yochanan said both of them learned it from the same verse, and we assume that they both must be basing it on B'Nisan Nivra HaOlam, as opposed to the fact that there's a debate about this issue. Some people actually delete that line and explain that really you could explain the machloket in those two cases between Tishrei and Nisan. I'm not going to get into the details, but just know that some people take out that line. So let's go back to the Braita, Tanya. We'll just review, and then we're going to see each one of these dates. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer, B'Tishrei Nivra Olam, B'Tishrei Noldu Avot, B'Tishrei Meitu Avot, B'Pesach Nolad Yitzchak, B'Rosh Hashanah Nifkeda Sarah Rachel v'Chana, B'Rosh Hashanah Yatsa Yosef, excuse me, B'Beit Asurim, B'Rosh Hashanah B'Tela Avodah Me'avotin B'Mitzrayim, B'Nisan Nigalu, B'Tishrei Atidin Ligael. If we take this opinion, let's just summarize all the things he said. On the 1st of Tishrei, the majority of historical events of importance happened. That's basically what he says. They happened in Tishrei. The world was created. The fathers were born, fathers meaning Avram and Yaakov, not Yitzchak, because Yitzchak's an exception. Again, we're going to see all of this inside and how we get to it. So on Tishrei, the Avot were born, they died. Sarah, Rachel, and Chana, their prayers were answered on Rosh Hashanah also. Yosef got out of jail, the Jews got out of slavery. The only exceptions to the rule, 1, Yosef was born, okay? He was born on Pesach. Number 2, the Jews got out of Egypt. But which then makes sense why he thinks in the end that B'Tishrei Atidin Ligael, the future redemption is going to happen in Tishrei, because that's kind of the way things go. All the important events happen in Tishrei. Rabbi Yoshua agrees partially and disagrees partially. He says, B'Nisan Nivra HaOlam, B'Nisan Noldu Avot. The fathers were all born in Nisan, and B'Nisan Meitu Avot. They all died in Nisan as well. Nisan is the key month. B'Pesach Nolad Yitzchak, B'Rosh Hashanah Nifkeda Sarah Rachel v'Chana, B'Rosh Hashanah Yatsa Yosef B'Beit Asurim, B'Rosh Hashanah B'Tela Avodah Me'avotin B'Mitzrayim. Those 3 he agrees that it happened on Rosh Hashanah. Sarah, Rachel, and Chana got answered. Joseph got out of Egypt, and the slavery ended in Mitzrayim. However, the Avot were born in Nisan, they died in Nisan, and B'Nisan Nigalu and B'Nisan Atidin Ligael. And the redemption happened in Nisan, and therefore the future redemption is going to happen in Nisan. Okay, normally we say that we go by Rabbi Eliezer, Tishrei Nivra HaOlam, and Nisan is like the anniversary. There's the birth of the world, which is a universal theme. There's the getting out of Egypt, which was just us, and therefore it must be, right? Those are the 2 differences, universal versus unique, like a birthday and an anniversary. However, what's Rabbi Yoshua's opinion? He seems to say, and some of the commentaries say, because the Maharal is quoted as saying that we're going to learn this all from Psukim, but really it's the way they darshan the Psukim was affected by the way they viewed things, about how things should be. And I think that Rabbi Yoshua's approach must be that since the Exodus happened in Nisan, it must be that was a continuation of the creation of the world. And maybe it's an approach saying that the creation of the world, instead of saying birthday, universal, anniversary, specific to to our nation, maybe it's saying that our nation was redeemed in Nisan because that was kind of a continuation of the creation. The creation was all kind of to get toward this moment and to get toward our redemption, the future redemption, the creation of the Jewish nation. And maybe that's the approach. It's a little bit less universal. It's more about, this is our track within Jewish history, within the history of the world. Jewish history is the track within the history of the world. Maybe that's a perspective. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's just a suggestion. So now we're going to see all the details. We're going to start a Braita that's only going to end, on the next daf, toward the end of the next daf. And then we're going to quote another Braita. So today's all Braita, which usually is a little easier, all Hebrew, although I can't say the material is super easy, but we'll learn. Here goes. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Minayin shebetishrei nivra ha'olam. Let's stop for 1 quick minute. So Becky, you're asking, why is Rosh Hashanah in Tishrei according to Rabbi Yeshua? So there, I can't remember actually if it comes up in the Gemara. No, maybe it doesn't. But they say it's because it's Yom Hadin. And then why is it Yom Hadin? It doesn't say in the Torah it's Yom Hadin, right? But Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is known as a day of Kapara. So we assume that Rosh Hashanah must be, kind of a day of judgment. And that's why we celebrate Rosh Hashanah. Now you might say, okay, it shouldn't be called Rosh Hashanah, but I guess it's Rosh Hashanah L'Din. And it's the day we get judged, even if it's not the day of the creation of the world. So you'd have to assume that that's how he understands it or something like that. It's a very good question. I'm glad you asked. Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Minayin shebetishrei nivra ha'olam. Shneimar, both are going to derive the creation of the world from where? The psukim about the creation of the world, and from very similar psukim, but one is when God says, I'm going to do this, and one is when God actually does it. This is going to connect to the agricultural cycle. So God says, I'm going, right, the land should be full, should start growing grass, and mazria zera etz pri, and the seed should be growing for the fruits. Ezu chodesh sha'aretz. Okay, now it says motziah. It should be mile'ah deshaim bi'ilam malei perot. The way they understand this is tacheh aretz desha esev. The land should be full of grass. Okay, I said it a little wrong the first time. It should be full of grass is the way they read this. Mazria zera eitz pri. It will be full of fruits. So God says, and I'm going to make the land full of grass and full of fruits and full of things growing. So now, what month must this be? This must match when this normally happens. So what's the month? Okay, so you have to change the word motziah to mile'ah. Okay, and later we're going to see mile'ah, and it should be motziah. It's going to be the opposite. So when is the time where the land is full of dishaim, where everything's growing? It's full. V'ilam malei perot, and the trees are full of fruits. That's in the Chag HaAsif, the harvest season. Havei omer ze Tishrei. That's Tishrei. And furthermore, so number one, it sounds like the description God is giving is we're going to have the land be full of fruits. That must happen in, right? We're going to assume the land was full of fruits when? In the season where that normally happens. Right? God didn't create something against nature. If he created it full, he must have created it in the month where it's always full. Ve'oto perek, second proof, zman revi'ah. It was the rainy season. How do we know it was the rainy season? What happened? God planted grass and fruit trees, and then it started to rain. How do we know it started to rain? Right? It started to rain, and then they were able to grow from the rain. Shneimar says also in the description of Sefer Breshit in chapter 2, now we're skipping to, Ve'ed ya'aleh min ha'aretz. And then it says, right, this mist will come up from the ground, V'ishkat kol pnei adama, and it rained on, right? It caused growth in all of the adama. So this is describing the rainy season, which is Cheshvan, which comes right after Tishrei. Perfect. Okay, there's your proof. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, what's his proof? How do we know it was created in Nisan? Shneimar v'totzeh haaretz desha esev mazria zera ve'etz oseh pri. I'll tell you that this isn't 100% clear how each one correlates with each perush. Okay, there's a bit of a stretch here, but again, this is the world of drasha. You're allowed to do that. So here he's bringing the pasuk not when God said this is what's going to happen, but this is the description of when it actually happens in the first chapter of Breshit. And it says that the land brought forth, okay, if you have to explain it that way, the land brought forth batotzei, desha esev mazlia zera, it started to grow grass and things that would help plant, ve'etz oseh pri, and trees that created fruits. Now, this doesn't describe them full of fruits or full of grass and things growing. Therefore, they assume, again, you have to change the word, it's a mistake. Nisan is when things start to grow. It's the beginning of after the rainy season, when they start to sprout. Only at the end are they fully grown. So therefore, this is describing a time when they're only partially grown. Okay, second proof, just like the first one had first proof, and maybe because these psukim are not the clearest proofs, as you can tell, because you can really explain the words, however you want. I mean, a little bit it's in the words, but not clearly. So how do you know this? Another further proof is this is the time the world was created. God created animals and birds, and he must have created them in the season where they mate, because otherwise, right, how would they mate? Because they don't want to wait 5 months, 6 months till they start mating. God must have created them in the season where they began to mate immediately. And when is that? We already know. Remember our verse? Shene'emar lavshu karim hatzon. Remember that? Amakim yatfu bal yitra'u af yashiru. Right? This is when the sheep are going to become impregnated, when the wheat starts growing in the fields, right, where there's stalks, and then they start shaking back and forth. That's a description of Nisan and Iyar. So it must be that that's when the world was created, in that season where the animals mate. So now, what does each one do with the other verse? V'idach, and now they're going to talk about the pasuk Eitz oseh pri and Eitz pri. Eitz oseh pri means it just started to create fruits, whereas Eitz pri sounds like they're already full of fruits. So what is the person, Haktiv Eitz oseh pri? What is the first opinion, Rabbi Eliezer, who said in Tishrei? What does he do with this verse? It sounds like it just started creating fruits in the beginning of the season. That's a blessing for the future. God created the fruit trees whole, full of fruits. But when he said Eitz oseh pri, what he said is, these fruit trees will be trees that will always grow fruits in the future. That's what it meant, oseh. It will in the future do this. V'idach nami yaktiv Eitz pri. So what is the second opinion? That it was in Nisan and they weren't full of fruits. What does he do with the words Eitz pri, which seem to imply fully grown fruits? Okay, first we really want to focus on the first phrase here. This is the statement that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, which is what he's trying to say is it was in the season of Nisan, when normally they're not full of fruits on the tree. However, when God created the world, he created, right? You think of Adam HaRishon, was he a baby? No, he was created fully grown, according to this midrash. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says he was created fully grown, just like the fruit trees were created full of fruits. Everything now, it might have been the season where normally they just start to grow, but it was created full fruits, everything in full gear. That's likomatan, according to their height, nivru, the way they were going to ultimately be. Lida'atan nivru, okay, Rashi explains that means they agreed to be created. Okay, there was some sort of agreement between God and everything created that they said, okay, I'll agree to be created. Okay, what that means exactly is a good question. Litzivyonan nivru, there's many different interpretations of what this means. The best one I saw was liyofyan, in their beauty. They were in their full beauty, right? They were fully grown. They had, you could even say lida'atan means they had da'at and then they understood. Maybe it doesn't mean they agreed. They understood what was going on and they were created in their full beauty and glory. Now, we have a verse for likomatan, which is Eitz pri. That means they came out fully grown, all full, the tree's full. L'da'atan nivru, we don't have a proof, but l'tzivyonan nivru, we're going to have a proof. Shene'emar vayechulu hashamayim ba'aretz b'chol tzva'am. Right, we say this in Kiddush every week, and this is the end of the description of creation. That God finished the shamayim and the aretz and all the tzva'am. Now we normally assume that means the hosts in the sky, right, like type of stars and constellations. Al t'kri tzva'am ela tzivyonan. We say, but don't read this in the pshat. Tzva'am. This means tzivyonan, in their beauty and their glory. Okay, some people explain it differently, saying with their ratzon, not only did they agree, lida'atam, but they wanted it to be created. There's all different interpretations. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, that was the first. So right now, so far, we've gotten the proof for Tishrei or Nisan Nivru Olam, where they get it from. And then notice it has to do not with what I said about the Jewish people, the universal theme. This, at least their proof texts, seem to be very much grounded in agricultural cycle, which also makes sense with our holidays are all agricultural cycle. They had to do with the agriculture and the time of year. And then, by the way, according to one interpretation, it's more natural. And according to the other, it's more supernatural, right? Because it's saying that it happened in a time when normally it's not full of trees, and yet it was full of trees, right? If you say it was Nisan, if you say it was Tishrei, it's more that was the normal season and the time when you would have expected it to happen. Okay, keep this idea in mind. I'm trying to think if it connects because I just thought of this now. I think it connects. Yeah, it connects perfectly with the end of today's stuff. Okay, that one has this supernatural approach and one has a more natural approach. Next, how do you know that the Avot were born in Tishrei? Okay, we're not going to have a verse by the Avot. It's not going to be proven from there. It's going to be proven from somewhere else. Now we're describing when they sanctified the Beit HaMikdash. This is interesting. We keep going back to this, and we're going to quote a verse we quoted in the beginning of the Masechet soon about the year that the Beit HaMikdash was sanctified, and we tried to use that to prove where do we start counting the years from. We count the years just like the years of Egypt from Nisan for the kings. Anyway, I think it's just interesting to think about that they keep going back to the Beit HaMikdash, because again, we're talking here about Rosh Hashanah and kind of the creation of the world, and we're talking about other important historical events. I think all of this about historical events and milestones makes sense. It's coming up in this Masechet when it's all about Rosh Hashanah and God creating the world, and the question is, what was the purpose of creation of the world? And it was for these major events that were going to happen in the future. Right. And this idea, if you talk about all these major events, one of them is for sure the building of the first temple. It was a huge change in what was going on until then. So it's a very important event. And I think that's why it keeps getting mentioned. So now we have Shlomo HaMelech gathers all East Yisrael when B'yerech HaEtanim, in the month of Etanim. Okay, we don't know what that is. B'chag, it's on the Chag. What is Chag? Chag is Chag HaSukkot. He gathered them on Chag HaSukkot. That's when they did the sanctifying of the Mizbech, of the Beit HaMikdash. What is Yerach HaEtanim? Yerach Shenoldu Bo Etanei Olam. The month in which the Etanim of the Olam, people, the strong people of the world, the people who kind of hold up the world, who's that? The fathers, right? Zchut Avot, all that. We have their merits. We live upon their merits. So they're the people, they're the Avot. So Yerach HaEtanim is when they were born. My mashma dehai etan lishana detakifehu. How do we know that etan is a language, as a word meaning strong? Where does that come from? Kedichtiv etan moshavecha. This is in Bilam. Okay, it's one of his mishalim that he says about the Keni. Says etan moshavcha. Where you're dwelling is strong. Okay, you're strong. Ve'omer. Now we're going to bring two other verses. They're going to prove this connection between the Avot and the word etanim. Okay, if it wasn't clear enough, now we're going to prove it more. Ve'omer. Shim'u harim et riv Hashem va'etanim mostei aretz. This is Micha, the Navi, the prophet, and he says the mountains should hear the riv Hashem and the etanim mostei aretz. There's a parallel between the mountains and the etanim in this verse. So we're going to assume what's true for mountains is true for etanim. Next pasuk, ve'omer. Okay, now we're in Shir HaShirim. Kol dodi hine zeba midaleg al ha'arim mekabetz al hagvaot. Right, the voice of my beloved is coming. It's coming by the mountains and on the hills. Midaleg al ha'arim. What does that mean? B'zchut avot. Why is my beloved coming to me? Because of the zchut avot. Okay, and midaleg mekabetz al hagvaot b'zchut imahot. Nice, they have both the zchuyot of the fathers and the mothers. That's what keeps our connection to God. So what do you see here? The mountains is a reference to the Avot. By the way, there's a cute commentary saying that Heharim is like Hahorim, the parents. Okay, that there's a word connection also, but here certainly the pshat is to say Harim is opposite Etanim in the verse. They mean the same thing, right? It's poetic, and therefore the Harim or Zchut Avot must be Etanim is also the Avot. Again, Yerach Etanim, that would be a reference to the fathers, which means they were born in the Yerach Etanim, which is Chag, which is Tishrei. There's your proof. Now they say, I see quoted here is how there's a reference in, I think it's in Sefer Tehillim, that Maskil Eitana Ezrachi, where the commentaries say that Abraham is Eitan. It probably comes from here. that Avraham was Eitan because of this Gemara. Maybe it doesn't necessarily come from here, but this is again a proof that the Avot are called Eitan. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, Minayin shebenisan noldu avot, shene'amar vayihi b'shmonim shana v'arba me'ot shana. Okay, he's going to again prove it from the sanctification of the Beit HaMikdash, but a different verse. It was shmonim shana v'arba me'ot shana letzei b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim b'shana revi'it b'chodesh Ziv. We had this. When did? Okay, so you see, there's different parts of it, right? Something happened on Chag, and then also part of it happened in Chodesh Ziv. What is Ziv? Why is it called Chodesh Ziv? Now, everybody agrees that Chodesh Ziv is Iyar. The question is, why is Iyar Chodesh Ziv? So they say, Bayerach shenoldu bo Ziv tanei olam. It was the month that those who lit up the world were created. Now, this is very tricky. Didn't we just say Nisan and this is Iyar? How did we get to that? So there's one commentary that says this is just impossible to understand. But others say what it means is they were born before now. In other words, right now we're in Iyar, and it was the month that they had been born, so now they exist, right? They existed in the month of Iyar because they were born in Nisan, so therefore that's called Iyar, or somehow the connection that they're right juxtaposed to each other, those 2 months, somehow they connected. So now they say, V'idach nami, so now, okay, we have proof, Ziv, we know is Iyar, and that has to do with Ziv Tanei Olam. Eitan, we know is Tishrei, and that has to do with Eitan, right, the Avot. So each one has the proof. So now, obviously, we're going to have to say, what does each one do with the other? Idach nami haktiv b'yerach Eitanim. It says the month of the strong ones, which seem to imply the Avot. They were born that month. So what do they answer? Hatam d'kife b'mitzvot. You misunderstood what Eitan is. Eitan is strong, but it's the month itself is strong. Why is it strong? It's full of mitzvot. It's the month that we have the most commandments because we have the most holidays. So we have the most commandments associated with that month. And therefore, it's the strongest month. That's what it's a reference to, and has nothing to do with the Avot at all. V'idach nami. Hakti b'chodesh Ziv. Okay, what about the other interpretation? What does he do with Chodesh Ziv? Hahi di'ipe ziva li'ilane. It's the month where the trees start to shine. They start to show their glory. Okay, what is that? How do we know that that's Nisan? Tamarav Yehuda, Haiman did nafik b'yomei Nisan, v'chaze ilane dimalavlave. When you go out in the month of Nisan, this is the famous Berkata Ilanot. You make a special blessing in Nisan when you go and you see the trees starting to bloom. Omer baruch shelo chisar me'olamo klum, u'bara bo briot tovot v'ilanot tovot li'naot behem b'nei adam. Okay, so it's either lihitnaot or lihitgaot. There's different girsaot here, but it's a blessing we say when the fruits start to bloom that God is not, right? He hasn't left us without anything, meaning he's given us everything we want, right? And one of those things, right? Ilanot tovot, for us to be beautified by them, to enjoy their beauty. So now what do we have? We have that Ziv comes from the glory of the trees and not people. Okay, so each one basically explains that the verse to be talking not about humans, but about something else. Now we're going to go back to the bright. We've understood now how they get that the Avot were born either in Tishrei or Nisan. What about the next one? Manda amar b'Nisan noldu b'Nisan metu. Manda amar b'Tishrei noldu b'Tishrei metu. So now this is right. Each one says whatever month the Avot were born, the Avot died. So now you're going to bring the same proof for both, because all you have to do is prove, how do we know that the day they were born is the day or the month they were born is the month that they died? So now we see, Shene'emar vayomer alehem. Okay, Moshe says to Bnei Israel, this is when he's about to die. Okay, we're in Dvarim Lamed Aleph, the end of Sefer Dvarim. It says, right, Moshe says, Ben 120 shana anochi hayom. I'm 120 years old today. Lo uchal od latzef lavo. Right, I'm not going to be able to work anymore and do what I do. And God said, I'm not going to go across the Jordan, so I'm going to die here. Now, notice his wording. What's strange about his wording? He says, Shein tamud lamar hayom. When you say, how old are you? Do you say, I am X amount of years today? No, you say, I'm 60 years old. I'm 20 years old. You don't say, I'm 20 years old today. So why did he say I'm 120 years old? So the reason he said it today, Matam lamar hayom, hayom malu yamayu shnotai. He was basically saying, it's my birthday today. Today I became 120 years old. This is the day I was born. So from here we learn, Shakadosh Baruch Hu Yoshev u'Mimale Shnotehem Shel Tzadikim Miyom LeYom Michodesh LeChodesh. We know that Moshe, born on Zayin Adar, died on Zayin Adar. Right? The same day he died, the same day he was born. That's the tradition. So now they say It comes from here because God makes their days. It's a way of saying your days will be complete. And now they quote a pasuk, Shene'emal. It's a pasuk in Sefer Shmot. It has to do with the lo tiya mashakela va'akara ba'artzecha. You won't have people barren in your land. Et mispar yamecha maleh. It's a blessing to the people, and I will complete your days. Complete your days means you'll have a full life. Now, you would assume it means I'll have a full life, right? You wouldn't assume it means exactly you're going to be born and die on the same day, but that's the way they understand it to mean. And, right, so therefore they say, right, from that pasuk we learn it, that it's specifically for tzaddikim. So we got it. They were born and died on the same day. So once they were born in Nisan, they die in Nisan. They're born in Tishrei, they die in Tishrei. Pesach nolad Yitzchak. This is the most interesting one, because if you recall yesterday, I told you based on, right, it's actually based on Rashi in the Torah on our Parshat Shavua today, this week. Okay, so it says in Rashi, I'll quote it to you. The pasuk says, "Vayomer shuv ashuv elecha." I'm in chapter 18, pasuk 10. Ka'et chaya. Okay, right. One of the angels said, "I will come back next year, and your wife Sarah will have a baby." Okay, this is, we assume ka'et. Ka'et means a year from now, next year. Okay, whatever this day is. So Rashi says, at least that's how we understand the pasuk. And we understand that based on Rashi. Basically, Rashi says, "Ka'et hazot l'shana ha'ba'ah." It's exactly this time next year. And when was it? Pesach haya u'lepesach haba nolad Yitzchak. Because it doesn't say ki'et, but ka'et. Okay, so they learn from there. That's where we get it from. Okay, and then they also the matzot, right? There's a whole drasha in, I think it's in Seder Olam Rabbah, that talks about the dates and how it was Pesach and they were making matzot, blah, 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 right? Obviously, there wasn't a holiday of Pesach then, but since the rabbis like to say that the Avot did the mitzvot just like they did later, that's a whole other thing. But our Gemara is going to actually prove it in a very different way, which is going to be a little bit difficult to coordinate with reality. So here goes. Minalan. Okay, so the commentaries like Tosfot and other commentaries say, why didn't the Gemara quote that midrash? Okay, and I mean, I think the answer is obvious, which is there's different traditions. That one just became more popular maybe, and people knew it more, and partially because Rashi quoted it and put it in the Torah, so everybody learns that. But this one is a bit of a less known one, even though it's in the Gemara. So I'd be curious to hear from people if you've ever heard this midrash before. So where do we get that Yitzchak was born on Pesach? Midichtiv, lamoed ashuv elecha. 4 psukim later, it says, I'm going to come back at limoed. Now, what is limoed? Moed are times, but moed are also holidays, right? Ele moadei Hashem, asher tikru otam mikrai kodesh. The moadim are holidays. So when he says lamoed, they assume, this drasha assumes it means the next holiday I will come back and you'll have a son. Now, you can do the math and figure out how that's going to work. How much time is there in between holidays? So here go the possibilities. Emat kai, when did he say this? If it was Pesach, and he said, I'm coming back the next holiday. Well, that's in 50 days. Okay. Yomi, right? A woman cannot give birth in 50, become pregnant and give birth in 50 days. Ela, so let's go to the next one. Shavuot and right? He says, I'll come back in Tishrei. Well, akate. It's not even 5 full months, but let's say it's almost 5 months, right? So a little less than 5, it's a lot less than 5 months, but whatever. Even 5 months, maybe they're saying 5 months because that's what we have with the animals, right? We said the sheep have 5 months of pregnancy. No, that also doesn't work. Ella, what's the maximum we could have? Well, not even the maximum, but we'll start with this. Right? You could be on Sukkot, and the holiday, right, on Sukkot, and then go to Pesach. But again, but women don't give birth after 6 months. Well, Tana, the Braita says, it was a leap year. Once it was a leap year, you have 7 months. That already you could have, right? A 7-month pregnancy. Now you have to remember, times of the Gemara, they believed there's either 7-month pregnancy or there's 9-month pregnancy. There's no such thing as 8-month pregnancy. If it's 8 months, the baby's not going to survive. The fetus isn't viable. That's the way they believed. It wasn't just the rabbis. I think it was a medical, the way people believed in those days. It's either 7-month or 9-month. And now we're going to learn that there was a bit of a different nature of the 7-month pregnancy than there was about a 9-month pregnancy. That's going to come up soon. So they say that worked very well, except we have another problem. Remember what Sarah said. She says, listen, I don't get my period anymore. There's no way I could have a baby. So, sof kiman lemar yomi tuma batzredu. But wait, she first has to start having her cycle again before she could get pregnant. So that's going to take time. She's going to have Yemei Tum'ah, where she can't be together with Avram, and only after that can she get pregnant. So you don't have 7 months. You have less than 7 months, basically. So also, you don't give birth less than 7 months. So what do they answer? Amar Marzutra, and here we're going to learn a difference they said about the 9 months and 7 month pregnancies. Lemanda Amar yoledet litishaina yoledet lemekuta'in. Even if you say that a woman who gives birth for a 9 month pregnancy doesn't give birth lemekuta'in, that means she won't give birth in the beginning of the 9th month. She'll really only give birth later in the 9th month. She needs like a full 9 months. I don't think it means full, but toward the end of the 9th month. This sounds similar to all our counting we've been doing. Beginning of it, end of it, right? What do you count as a month? So even those who hold that yoledet l'tisha does not yoledet l'mekutay. Mekutay means cut off. She doesn't give birth in the beginning of the month. However, even if you hold that way, there's a debate about it. Okay, there's a debate about whether women give birth. It's interesting that the rabbis have debates about this, right? Whether women give birth could give birth potentially in the beginning of the 9th month or toward the end of the 9th month, right? Obviously, this doesn't match our reality so well, but there's a debate about that. But yoledet l'shiva, yoledet l'mekuta'im, right? You would have thought the opposite. But they say specifically, one who gives birth within 7 months sometimes gives birth in the beginning into the 7th month, 6 months, and we'll see in a minute, 2 days. Okay, which means 6 months and 2 days we could give her. If you have 7 months, she could have started her cycle again and gotten out of her days of Tumah and gotten pregnant and given birth 6 months later, 6 months and 2 days later. How do we know this? Again, they're not going to prove it medically. They're going to prove it from a verse in the Torah. It's actually in the Nevi'im by Hannah, Shnema. Okay, it says that's when she had a baby. Okay, this is, just find the whole pasuk. Where is it? Okay, so she got pregnant, and it's actually weird because it really should be Vatar Chana v'yilit Tkufot hayamim. She had a son, but that's the way they understand it. What is Tkufot? Tkufot are periods. What kind of periods? 3 month periods. So 2 3-month periods. Tkufot is plural, and Yamim 2 days, 6 months, 2 days. Okay, that's how they get it. Mi'ut Tkufot shtayim, mi'ut Yamim shtayim. Right, the minimum of Tkufot, since it's plural, is 2. The minimum of Yamim is 2. So the minimum pregnancy could be 6 months and 2 days. And there you have it. That's how we get to the fact that Yitzchak was born on Pesach because the angels came on Sukkot. It was a leap year, and she got pregnant, obviously, right away, right? Which wouldn't be true, by the way, according to the other interpretation. You could think, right? To me, the way I read this is I think in my head, this midrash is trying to say, right? If you think about it, Sarah and Abraham were waiting so long for a child. The angels came and said exactly this time next year. That means it took her 3 months to get pregnant, and she had a baby, right? It stretched it out. This is saying she had it in the quickest, it's almost the most miraculous way possible, right? It all happened quick, right? And she had the baby. Okay. So again, we have this issue of miraculous versus maybe more natural, right? It would have taken her time to start her cycle up, to be able to get pregnant, right? That's the more natural course of events, whereas this, which again, this doesn't appear in our Gemara at all. That explanation isn't here. It is in a different midrash. Our Gemara has the approach that it was a miraculous kind of thing that happened super fast and right in the quickest possible time. Next, Rosh Hashanah nifkeda Sarah, Rachel, v'Chana. So now we're going to play a Gzera Shava game. Okay, we're going to say this word, and then this word, and we're going to compare like that. So how does it go? Amar Rabbi Elazar, ate pkida, ate zchira, zchira. This is like the topic sentence. It says that we're going to have a drasha about pkida, Hashem pakad, right? Lifkod is God answered, and zichira, which is God remembered. So let's see how it works. K'tiv b'Rachel v'yizkor Elohim et Rachel. Uchtiv b'Chana v'yizkarei Hashem. Both Chana and Rachel have the word zichira, remembering. Now, where else does zichira appear? And how do we know it's Rosh Hashanah? Because Rosh Hashanah, ate zichira mi Rosh Hashanah. So we make a Gzera Shava between Rachel and Chana, not to each other, but to the pasuk about Rosh Hashanah. Dichtiv Shabbaton Zichron Truah. It's a day of rest, of remembering, right? The remembrance of the shofar, whatever, however you understand that, but it's a day of remembrance. So therefore, you have that. Next. Pkida. So now, once we have Rachel and Chana or Rosh Hashanah, now we can jump from there to Sarah. Why? K'tiv b'Chana ki pakad Hashem et Chana. Now by Chana it said Zchira, and we already learned Chana is Rosh Hashanah. Now we're going to take Hannah and compare her to Sarah. By Hannah, it says, Hashem pakad Hashem et Hannah, and K'tiv b'Sarah, Hashem pakad et Sarah. So therefore, you have that it happened on Rosh Hashanah. That's why we read this on Rosh Hashanah. Both of these are get read on Rosh Hashanah, one for the Torah, we're reading one for the Haftorah. Rosh Hashanah yatsa Yosef mi beit ha'asurim. Minalan, where do we get that Yosef got out of jail? Right, that really doesn't appear in the Torah. Dichtiv. We're going to learn it from Tehillim. Okay, the Tehillim that we've been quoting. It's interesting. This whole studio seems to quote a lot of verses we've been talking about. Remember, we said that is blow the shofar when the month is covered, which we had different interpretations, but either which way, we understand that means Rosh Hashanah. Then it says, Eidut behosif samo b'tzeito al eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, it says, Eidut, okay, we're going to have this testimony of Yosef, samo b'tzeito, where he was placed when he got out, al eretz Mitzrayim. He was placed on Egypt. That sounds like it's discussing when he got out of jail and became the ruler in Egypt. So now you see this connection. It comes right after the verse, Tik'u b'chodesh shofar, which is a reference to Rosh Hashanah. Then it talks about Yosef getting out of jail and becoming in charge of Egypt. So that must have happened on the same day. And furthermore, we're going to quote the next verse from there, which is B'Rosh Hashanah batla avodah me'avotenu b'Mitzrayim. They stopped slavery. K'tiv ha'chavot seiti etchem mitachat tzivlot Mitzrayim. This is in Sefer Shmot. God says, I took you out from, and this is the key word here, sivlot, from the suffering, right? Your hard work in Egypt. Uktiv hatam, in the verse about Tik'u b'chodesh shofar, in Tehillim there, it says, Hasiroti misevel shechmo. I took off the sevel, the hard work, or the suffering also from their shoulders. So here you see, God stopped us from being slaves. That's a connection. That's why we quote the pasuk in Shemot to show that sevel is a reference to the sevel in Mitzrayim, the suffering, and therefore this verse must be also referring to the fact they stopped being slaves. Also, b'chodesh shofar, right? Tik'u b'chodesh shofar, in the month that you blow the shofar. So there we get in Tishrei. B'Nisan nigalu. This is the easiest one, kid'ita, because it says so in the Torah. Right? It says chodesh elachem. We already proved that was Nisan, and then it says, right, they got out of Egypt. B'Tishrei atidin ligael. At shofar shofar. This is learned from Gzera Shava of the shofar. K'tiv hacha tik'u b'chodesh shofar. We blow the shofar, right? In Sefer Tehillim, it says b'chesed yom chagenu, which we understood to be Rosh Hashanah. Uktiv hatam b'yom hu yitaka b'shofar gadol. And in the future, a big shofar is going to be blown. So here you see future redemption shofar, Rosh Hashanah shofar. That's how we get it. What about Rabbi Yoshua? Omer b'Nisan nigalu, b'Nisan atidin ligael. The future redemption will be in Nisan. Minalan. Amalka leil shimurim. Okay, in the description when they got out of Egypt in Shemot Yubed it says, right before they get out, God says, leil shimurim hu la'Hashem hotziam eretz Mitzrayim hu alayla hazeh. This will be a protected evening. That's the simple reading. Halayla hazeh la'Hashem shimurim l'chol b'nei Yisrael ledorotam. This will be a night that's protected for the Jews for all generations to come. So how does he understand this? Not the way we normally understand it, which we'll see in 1 minute. But Leil Shimurim, Leil HaMishumar Uba Misheshek Yimei Bereshit. It's a night that's protected, meaning it was saved, not protected, right? The Shmor means to save. It also means to protect. It means both. To save is to basically, it was saved in God's diary, from the beginning, from when he created the world, that the future redemption will be on this day as well. Okay, that's his idea that it was already from there. That's what Shimurim, he understands that to mean the future redemption. V'idach, what is the other way of reading it? Rabbi Eliezer's reading. Laila ha'mishubar uba min ha'mizikim. It's a night that's protected from any bad, right? For future generations, this night will always be protected. That's why we don't say Hamapil and Kriyat Shema Lamita, right? We don't say the whole thing because we don't need protection. Every night we need protection, just not that night. That night's a night we're always protected forever. So 2 different ways of understanding that. One of them getting to the Nisan Nigalu. Some of the commentaries ask, what do you mean? Don't we pray for Mashiach every day and the Mashiach could come at any time? And what do you mean? It's either Nisan or Tishrei. So some people say that really the Mashiach is supposed to come either Nisan or Tishrei, depending on your approach. But if we do good deeds and we bring the Mashiach earlier, it could happen earlier, but that's kind of where it's set to come on a normal way if we don't make it happen earlier. Some people say there's a difference between Mashiach coming and the redemption. Mashiach is the first stage. That can happen anytime. But then the redemption, the actual redemption will happen later. Again, what that means exactly, whole question, I'm going to leave that aside. Okay. Last source for today. Azdu l'ta'amai. Both of these people, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, have another machloket between them, which fits in perfectly with their machloket here. Titania. And it's all about when did the flood happen? What was the date of the flood? So we saw before about in the 601st year of Noach, right? We saw on a particular date the rain stopped, right? That was on the first day of the first month. We had a whole thing about that. That was yesterday. But now we're going to talk about when the rain started. So it happened in the 600th year of Noach's life. That's why in the 601st year it dried up, but it started in the 600th year. The second month. Now, normally second month is Iyar because we always count the months from Nisan. So it sounds like it's Iyar on the 17th of the month, but not everyone's going to think it's Iyar. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, which makes sense because we're going to say, right, it's the second month of the year. The year was Tishrei, because according to him, Tishrei nivra ha'olam. So now we say, I'm sorry, no, my mistake. I just said it wrong. Not Cheshvan. Iyar, which is the second to Nisan. Okay, so we're counting from Nisan because Nisan nivra ha'olam. So now he says, why do I know? Not only, right, do I think this, but I know, first of all, in general, the months go by Nisan. So it makes sense, right? The second month. Now he says, how do I know? Now he's going to prove it both from astrology and from the agriculture or things that go on in nature. He says the following: it was a time when Mazal Kima, okay, the Mazalot. I'll already tell you now. There's pictures for this Masechet as well. They're going to be up on the site every day. So today's pictures are up already. You can look at them. There's some pictures of the constellations according to Jewish tradition, the zodiac signs. So I'm not going to get into all the details here because it's not my specialty, but you can look there at the pictures. I see someone put it in the chat. Yom Shamazal Kima Shokea Bayom Umayanot Mitma'atim. Okay, there's a lot of debates about how to exactly understand this, but the constellation of Kima, which is found between two other constellations, it's a series of stars and things. So it sets during the day, which really means you don't see it during the day. It usually comes out at night. There's all these cycles about when the constellations come out. We'll see other sources sugid about this as we go on through Shas. But the idea is that normally in this season, okay, it's because it's all seasonal. This time of year in Iyar, it normally is only appearing at night. And the Mayanot Mitmatim, what happens in Iyar? The rains dry up, and therefore all the springs dry up, right? Everything starts to dry up because there's no more rain coming. When we talk Sheshinu Ma'asehem, we're going to see that from Kima comes the rain. The flood came from Kima. So, מתוך ששינו מעשיהם, שינו הקדוש ברוך הוא עליהם מעשה בראשית, והעלה מזל קימה ביום, ונטל שני כוכבים מקימה, והביא מבול לעולם. God said, you changed the acts of nature by the way you were behaving. You were supposed to behave naturally in a particular way, and instead you took it the wrong way. I'm going to take nature and I'm going to flip it on its head. I'm going to take the season in Iyar when everything dries up, and Kima at this time of year is not around during the day. I'm going to pull Kima out during the day, and I'm going to take two stars from Kima. Apparently there's hundreds of them. I'm going to take two of them. I'm going to make a big flood from these two stars from Kima. And obviously I'm going to bring water when there's not normally water. So I'm going to change nature because of what you did. This is what I said before, that Rabbi Yehoshua is in right? That God is doing things against nature, against what you would have expected. Likewise, in the description of the creation, right? He says that it was in the time, actually, no, it's not. Okay, I'm wrong. Right, I was trying to connect it. He's the one who says V'nisan nivra. No, it is because V'nisan nivra. Right, in Nisan he says it was created. It's also against nature. Normally, right, it was created whole, even though it normally doesn't. It wasn't the time when the rains come immediately and things are normally supposed to grow. Right, God was trying to kind of make a point of the whole thing, to make a change. It was the other half of the year where everything is flipped. Kima is out during the day, and the rains come out normally then, right? So, Yom Shemazal Kima Ole Bayom Umayanot Mitgabrim. Now you would expect, okay, I could end right here. You would expect him to say, right, God stayed within what God normally does, right? It was within nature he brought the Mabul. But the fact is, I'm just going to continue one more line. It says here, Umitoch She Shinu Masehem Shina Kadosh Baruch Hu Alehem Maseh Bereshit. And because they changed their ways, God changed. The Gemara is going to say, what are you talking about? That's not a shinoi. That's exactly what was supposed to happen. And we'll get to that tomorrow. So with that, we'll finish today. And I will leave you in suspense why exactly he says that kind of a statement. A lot to think about in today's daf. Have a great day, everyone.